A Nigerian market was full of activity as usual. Vendors called out to customers, their voices mixing into a loud blend of bargaining, conversation, and laughter. Stalls displayed bright, colorful fabrics, and the air was filled with the strong sense of fresh spices and grilled beef barbecue. Moving through the busy crowd, George carried his camera with a playful smile. He is a content creator. His viewers enjoyed this kind of real, unedited content of everyday life in the heart of the city. As he stopped near a fruit stand to adjust his camera, a sharp, harsh laugh suddenly rose above the noise. He turned to find the source. He saw a man who was sitting near a pile of discarded crates, dressed in dirty, torn clothes. His face was smeared with dirt, and his hair was messy and uncombed. The man kept laughing loudly, rocking back and forth, as if he was amused by a joke that only he understood. George became curious. He pointed his camera at the man and started recording. "Everyone, pay attention," George said in an exaggerated, dramatic tone. "I present to you the laughing man of Mile 2 Market." The man's behavior was strange. He waved his arms around, clapped his hands in time with his laughter, and sometimes even slapped the ground. People in the market kept their distance, whispering among themselves, but George was focused on the video he was recording. This was the kind of content that would get attention. He zoomed in, capturing every detail: the man's wide grin, his red, tired eyes, and how his laughter grew louder whenever someone looked at him. By the time George left the market, he could already imagine the number of views the video would get. That evening, he edited the footage, added lively background music, and gave it a playful title. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. The comments were filled with laughing emojis and people daring each other to copy the man's unusual laugh. George enjoyed the attention that came with his sudden popularity. His subscriber count was growing quickly, and companies started reaching out to collaborate with him. But despite all the excitement, he read one of the comments, warning him that the man he had filmed wasn't actually insane, but cursed. George ignored the warning, believing it to be nothing more than superstition spread online. Over the weekend, George's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His latest video was going viral, bringing in thousands of likes, shares, and positive comments. However, mixed in with the praise were disturbing messages. 3 young fans who had attempted their own versions of the Laughing Man challenge had died. At first, George thought it was just a strange coincidence. Accidents happen, he told himself. But as he read more about the incidents, he felt uneasy. One victim had fallen from a balcony while laughing uncontrollably. Another was hit by a car, and witnesses said she had been giggling just before the accident. The third had drowned in her bathtub, and her family reported hearing eerie laughter in the house before discovering her body. George set his phone down, his stomach tightening. He refused to believe the deaths had anything to do with his video. It didn't make sense. There was no logical connection. But his followers kept insisting that the Laughing Man wasn't just a strange person. He was cursed. The following Friday, George went back to Mile 2 Market to prove that the rumors were nonsense. This time, his friend Kevin joined him. Unlike George, Kevin was cautious, rational, and deeply loyal. While George set up his camera, Kevin watched the market carefully, his expression tense. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Kevin asked quietly. "Relax," George said dismissively. "It's just a joke. People love this kind of content. You saw how many views the last video got." Kevin didn't seem convinced but didn't argue. The Laughing Man was in his usual spot, rocking back and forth, his rough, uneven laughter cutting through the noise of the market. George started recording, capturing the man from every angle. As the camera rolled, Kevin found himself laughing too. The man's laughter was strangely contagious, breaking through his initial hesitation. "See," George said with a grin, "it's harmless." That night, George uploaded the new footage, and everything repeated as before. The number of views increased rapidly, comments poured in, and the Laughing Man challenge became even more popular. 3 days later, Kevin called George, his voice shaky. "I can't sleep," Kevin said. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear that laugh. It's everywhere." On the 7th day, George's phone vibrated with a horrifying message. Kevin was dead. His sister heard a scary laughter from his room, and when she opened his bedroom, she found even laughing and blood came down from his eyes. "You're responsible," one comment said. "Delete the videos before more people die." Another warned, "The laughing man is not a joke. You've awakened something dangerous." Kevin's death weighed on him, filling him with guilt. At first he had dismissed the warnings as mere superstition, but now the pattern was undeniable. 7 days, the laughter, the deaths. Could they really be connected? The room felt too small, too suffocating. He grabbed his jacket and left, walking aimlessly as his thoughts spiraled. Eventually, he ended up at a small bar in a quiet part of the city. He took a bottle of beer when his phone buzzed. Another notification, another person trying the Laughing Man challenge. His stomach twisted with anxiety. He needed to find the truth. Later that evening, George met with Faith, a spiritualist and social media influencer he had encountered when he first started creating content. Faith was known for blending mysticism with modern storytelling, and her YouTube channel featured stories about curses, folklore, and supernatural investigations. When George explained his situation, Faith's expression became serious. "George, this isn't just an online trend," she said. "The Laughing Man is more than just a person. He is connected to something ancient and dangerous." George leaned back, unconvinced. "It's just a coincidence. People always look for someone to blame. That's how the internet works." Faith sighed and took out a small leather pouch filled with herbs and stones. "A coincidence wouldn't explain why your friend died exactly 7 days after mocking the man, or why others are having the same disturbing visions. You've awakened something that grows stronger the more people laugh at it." Her words made George uneasy, but he wasn't ready to accept responsibility. "So what do you expect me to do? Delete the videos and lose all that engagement? My career is finally taking off." Faith narrowed her eyes. "You have to choose what matters more, your fame or the lives being lost because of it." That night, Faith performed a ritual in her small studio. The walls were lined with shelves filled with old books and artifacts. She lit incense and chanted quietly, asking for protection over George. As the smoke curled through the air, she suddenly gasped and clutched her chest. Her eyes became unfocused, and her voice dropped to a low, rough whisper. Faith snapped out of her trance, sweat forming on her forehead. "You can't stop it unless you understand what's really happening. The Laughing Man isn't just insane, he's a messenger. Something or someone is using him." She took a deep breath and looked at George. "I know someone who can help us. His name is Baba Kazim. I always go to him for guidance. He's in the market." As the night went on, George struggled to sleep. His phone buzzed again, another notification, another fan copying the Laughing Man. But this time, he didn't feel excited. He felt uneasy. Even after Faith's warning, he couldn't bring himself to delete the videos. The attention, the views, it was everything he had worked for. But deep down, he knew he was stepping into something dangerous. The Mile 2 market was as loud and busy as ever that Friday. But for George, the lively atmosphere felt heavy and unsettling. Every noise seemed louder, every shadow more threatening. He was here because Faith insisted. Her words still echoed in his mind. The answers lie where it began. This time, she was with him, which was both comforting and unnerving. She held a leather-bound notebook filled with symbols and spells, her sharp eyes scanning the market. Finding Baba Kazim wasn't difficult. They moved through the winding rows of stalls, passing vendors selling colorful fabrics, carved charms, and all kinds of trinkets. Eventually, they reached a quiet corner where an old stall stood, covered in faded charms and dried herbs. Behind the counter sat an elderly man, slightly hunched, his sharp eyes studying George. "Good afternoon, sir," Faith greeted. The old man nodded slowly. "What brings you here today, my daughter?" Faith stepped forward. "We need to know about the madman in the market." At the mention of that name, Baba Kazim's expression darkened. He gestured for them to sit. His movements were slow but purposeful. When they settled, he spoke in a low, serious tone. "That man is not what he seems," Baba Kazim said. "His name is Coker. He was once a wealthy merchant, but when his business started to fail, he became desperate. He turned to forbidden rituals, seeking wealth and protection. He made a deal with an ancient and terrible being. In exchange for fortune, he was cursed to remain in this market, forced to laugh every Friday. The moment he failed to do so, the curse transformed him into what you see now." George asked, "Why the laughter? What does it mean?" "The laughter keeps the curse active," Baba Kazim explained. "It marks those who laugh at him as sacrifices. The more people laugh, the stronger the entity becomes. Your videos have spread the curse beyond this market, boy. You've made it more powerful." A cold, heavy feeling settled in George's chest. "Then how do we stop it?" Baba Kazim hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "To break the curse, you must destroy the altar where the deal was made. But it won't be easy. Koka is no longer just a man. He is a vessel, and the entity will fight to protect its hold." Faith leaned forward, her voice firm. "Where is this altar?" "It's beneath the market," Baba Kazim said, "hidden in a chamber that only Koka can access. Even if you find it, the entity will not let you destroy it." Baba Kazim reached under his counter and pulled out a small charm carved with intricate patterns. "Take this. It will shield you from some of the curse's power, but it won't make you invincible. You will need more than protection. You will need courage." As they left Baba Kazim's stall, the market seemed darker, the shadows longer. George's mind raced. The idea of facing Coker, or whatever he had become, filled him with fear. But he couldn't ignore the guilt weighing on him. His videos had put people in danger. If he didn't act, more lives would be lost. Faith broke the silence. "We need to warn your followers. Tell them to stop laughing, to stop watching." George hesitated. "They won't listen. They think it's just a joke." "Then make them listen," Faith said firmly, "before it's too late." George nodded, though doubt still lingered. He clutched the charm tightly, hoping it would give him strength. Shares. His videos of the laughing man had gone viral, inspiring countless people to imitate him. The laugh challenge was spreading fast, and with every copycat video, more people were unknowingly putting themselves in danger. Faith clearly frustrated. "You need to stop this, George. Take down the videos. Warn your audience. Every second you wait, someone else could be at risk." George buried his face in his hands, his voice shaking. "It's not that easy. If I delete them, people will just re-upload them. That's how the internet works." "Then make them listen." Faith insisted. "Record a video and tell them the truth." George hesitated. The truth sounded ridiculous. A cursed man whose laughter marked people for death. Who would take him seriously? And what about his reputation, his career? If he leaned into this, people would call him a fraud or a lunatic. But then he thought of Kevin, his lifeless body, and his confidence wavered. After a serious thinking, George recorded a serious video. He spoke about the deaths, the curse, and his fear that the laughing man wasn't just a harmless street performer. His voice trembled as he begged his audience to stop sharing the videos and warned them of the danger. When he posted it, the backlash was immediate. The comments he read were, "This guy's lost it. What a pathetic attempt to get more views. The curse isn't real, bro. Relax." Worse, some people took it as a challenge. The laugh challenge exploded in popularity. Influencers around the world started posting their own videos, laughing louder, pushing the trend even further. One of them was Becky, a rival content creator known for mocking others online. In her latest video, she was doing imitation of the laughing man. That evening, Faith rushed into George's apartment looking frightened. "Have you seen Becky's live stream?" George shook his head, feeling uneasy. Faith grabbed the remote, turned on the TV, and to their surprise, it was Becky's death the reporters were talking about. Authorities called it an accident, but her followers knew the truth. Clips of her live stream spread rapidly, with people analyzing every frame for clues about the shadowy figure. Fear took over social media as viewers realized the deaths were real. The laughing man wasn't just a strange urban legend, he was real, and he brought death with him. The next morning, they went back to Baba Kazim. "The demon knows you're trying to stop it," the herbalist said with a serious expression. "You have 7 days, George. The mark is already on you." George's chest tightened. 7 days, until what? "Until it takes you," Baba Kazim replied. "Why do people who have watched it died immediately?" asked George. "Those who encounter him and laugh will be tormented for 7 days before they die," Baba Kazim replied. "The people that watched the video you posted died immediately because he can't feast on their souls. The entity has to look you in the eye to torment you and take your soul," he explained further. George turned to Faith. The fear in her eyes matched his own. They had only 7 days to destroy the altar, confront Coker, and break the curse, or he would be its next victim. As the days passed, things got worse. George saw shadows moving where there shouldn't be any, and heard distant laughter in empty rooms. He could hardly sleep, tormented by nightmares of Coker's twisted face and the demon's glowing eyes. Faith was determined to find answers. She searched through old market records and stories from the past. She discovered that the land beneath Mile 2 Market had once been used for ritual sacrifices. Because of this, the market's foundation made the curse stronger, keeping it tied to the land. "This is more than just about Coker," Faith said, her voice shaking as she explained what she had found. "This curse has been growing here for generations. Destroying the altar might not only break the curse, it could free the market from its grip." On the 7th day, George felt the mark's power growing. When he looked in the mirror, his reflection flickered, showing a thinner, hollow-eyed version of himself. The eerie laughter never stopped, echoing in his ears. "We're running out of time," Faith said, holding his arm tightly. "Tonight we face him." Night fell heavily over Mile 2 Market. The usually lively marketplace was now eerily silent, as if everything had stopped moving. George and Faith walked carefully through the narrow paths, their steps barely making a sound on the dusty ground. In George's hand, the charm Baba Kazim had given them glowed faintly, its detailed carvings pulsing with strange energy. "We have to hurry," Faith whispered. "The demon knows we're coming." George nodded, but stayed silent. Fear and regret filled his mind, weighing on him like a heavy load. He gripped the charm tighter as they neared the entrance to a hidden chamber beneath the market. The entrance was hidden behind an old, abandoned stall. Its wooden planks were warped and covered in mold. Faith knelt and traced her fingers over a faint symbol carved into the stone floor. "This is it," she said, "the mark that shows where the altar is." A chill ran down George's spine as Faith started chanting in a low voice. Despite the tension, her tone was steady. The symbol began to glow, and the ground beneath them trembled. Slowly, a secret staircase appeared, leading down into darkness. "Are you ready for this?" Faithy asked, looking straight at George. He hesitated. "Not really, but we don't have a choice." Taking a deep breath, they stepped down into the chamber. As they went deeper underground, the air grew colder. The walls were damp and covered in strange markings. In the distance, faint laughter echoed, growing louder with every step. At the bottom of the staircase, they entered a large, dimly lit room with an eerie red glow. In the center stood the altar, a disturbing structure made of stone and bone, pulsing as if it were alive. Shadowy figures surrounded it, their faces hidden as they chanted in a deep, inhuman language. Standing in the middle of the gathering was Coker. He no longer looked ragged. Instead, he wore a deep red ceremonial robe, his face twisted into a cruel grin. "You dare challenge me?" Coker's voice boomed, layered with countless other voices. "We're here to stop this," George shouted, his voice shaking but determined. Coker laughed, and the sound made the entire chamber tremble. Stop this, foolish boy. You have no idea what you've set in motion. Coca lifted his arms, and the shadows around the altar twisted into a monstrous shape. The demon appeared, a horrifying creature with long, jagged limbs and glowing, hollow eyes that seemed to stare straight into George's soul. Its laughter was deafening, shaking the chamber like a physical force. "George," the demon hissed, its voice cold and tempting. "You have already given me so many souls. Why stop now? Serve me, and I will spare your life and the lives of those you love." "Don't listen to it, George," Faith shouted over the noise. "It's lying." The demon grinned wider. "Am I? Join me, and I will give you power beyond your wildest dreams. Refuse, and you will suffer a fate worse than death." George froze. The demon's words weighed heavily on him. It was offering him safety, not just for himself, but for the people he cared about. He looked at Faith, who was chanting desperately, her hands raised toward the altar. George's mind was racing. He could feel the mark on his soul burning and the laughter in his head growing louder. For a brief moment, he thought about giving in, ending the pain, and saving both Faith and himself. But then he remembered Kevin, Becky, and all the others who had died because of the curse. He had started this nightmare, and he couldn't let it hurt anyone else. "I won't do it," George said, his voice shaking but determined. The demon roared angrily, growing larger and filling the room. Shadows lashed out like tendrils, hitting the walls and ceiling. The altar began to shake, releasing bursts of dark energy. Faith's chant grew louder, and the charm in George's hand began to glow. He threw it at the demon, and the light surrounded it. The demon screamed in pain, its body twisting as the charm's power burned through it. Cracks appeared on the altar, and the cave started to collapse. Rocks fell from the ceiling, and the ground shook violently. As the altar shattered, the demon screamed one last time before being sucked into a vortex of light and darkness with Coca. George and Faith barely managed to escape the collapsing cave and emerged into the cold night, just as the ground closed behind them. The first light of dawn shone through the broken walls of the market, casting a dim glow on the ruins. The curse was lifted. The demon was gone. But George felt no relief, only exhaustion, an overwhelming tiredness that seemed to sink deep into his bones. Faith stood beside him, her face serious. "It's over," she said quietly, "but it came at a price." In the end, the curse had taken more than just lives. It had stripped George of his innocence, his sense of security, and his understanding of what really mattered. He looked at Faith, the only person who had been with him through it all. "We did it," he said quietly. He turned to look at the wreckage of the market, knowing that while it had been freed from the curse, the damage would remain. George nodded, his eyes scanning the destruction around them. The market was destroyed, and the joy that once filled the air was gone. His YouTube career was finished. His fame, followers, and sense of belonging had all been taken by the curse he had pursued for so long. Nodded, his eyes scanning the destruction around them. The market was destroyed, and the joy that once filled the air was gone. His YouTube career was finished. His fame, followers, and sense of belonging had all been taken by the curse he had pursued for so long.